What's that sound? It's for amusement only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast. Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. We got another call on the bingo line.
Hey, Nick, this is Brandon, or BTW75. In the background, you might hear a 600-win payoff going on, which is just a test. But that's the subject of my call. What's your recommendation for how to test the payout? There's so many payouts involved, it doesn't seem efficient to test every single one. Is there an efficient way to make a selection of tests that can comprehensively test all the functions? Thank you.
Now I should take the time to mention that Brandon has a magic screening game. Magic screen games have essentially two different paths, and sometimes three, that the payouts can go through depending on the position of said screen. In Brandon's case, he's got a circus queen. This is the first game with a blue section that allows for 3 or 2 in the blue to score either 300 or 600 replays. So to your question, Brandon, the easiest way that I've found to test replays is, rather than systematically testing every single odds jump on a particular color, Brandon's machine also has triple deck scoring, which means that the 3 odd steppers, red, yellow, and green, move independently. So in that situation, rather than step each score unit up to the top and test 3, 4, and 5 in a row in each color, here's my shortcut. I will test each color's 3, 4, and 5 in a row. So, meaning I will set the odd steppers to their default position and then test every combination of 3 in a row for each color, every combination of 4 in a row for each color, and every combination of 5 in a row for each color. Now, the way I accomplish this testing may be a little simpler than what you're doing, depending, although you've probably figured this out already. But what I will do is, let's say I'm testing all of the red. So, on the default magic screen position, this is what we're testing for inline wins. I will put 3 balls right beside each other in the red section. I'll shoot the 4th ball and just set it aside. After your 4th ball is shot and your 5th ball is lifted, you're able to push the R button in order to detect a winner. So I'll just set the 4th ball down on the apron and then walk to the back of the machine. Ignore the R button. From here, what you need to do is push on, and this is where it helps to have a wooden dowel so that you don't accidentally shock yourself somewhere. But push on the metal plate which holds the search disk wipers in place. What this will do is essentially the exact same thing that the R button press does in releasing those search disk wipers. They'll spin around and the search index will catch on and hold them in place while the game pays out. Now you know that the payout sound is very distinct. If you've heard the opening to my podcast, you know exactly what it is. Thunk, 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 thunk. So you listen for the number of times, and the default position, it's going to be 4 replays for 3 in a row. And then you'll notice when the game steps up replays, it's going to step up the replay counter that's associated with that particular color. So let's take red again as our example. There's a red replay counter which will step up 4 times to count the number of wins. Now, rather than reset the entire game and shoot a whole new one and do all that, what I will do instead is move the ball in that line that's furthest to the left one more position over to the right. So we still have 3 in a row, and now 2 of the numbers that were previously used are still used, and the third one is now in play in a 4th number. The 4th ball is still sitting on the apron waiting to test 4 in a row. Then we go back to the back. Now, if you were to push on the plate, which will start the search disk turning, it will not engage, and that's because you've already gotten a 3 in line win in the red. The game is smart enough not to pay you twice. So in order to make it score again, what you have to do is push the reset plunger with your index finger or with a dowel, and that will reset the replay counter for that color back to the 0 position, which will allow you to push the metal plate, and then the search disk will spin, it will stop, the search index coil will engage, holding it in place, and then the replays will start counting again. So at this point you should have 8. Continue on with each color, so you'll have to reposition the balls after each win, and the easiest way that I find to do it, because it can be difficult to reposition them depending on the holes that are in play, is to sometimes gently move the shutter with one finger, which will lift up the balls slightly in some of those hard to reach pockets and allow you to pick up the ball. So carry on, test all your reds, test all your yellows, test all your greens, and then you have your 3 in a row treble shot. If it consistently pays out 4, then you're in good hands. You know that the game is going to stop when it's supposed to. You know the game is going to engage the search index when it's supposed to for each color in the default position of the magic screen. Now, here's where things get a little more tricky. There's a unit which will allow you to move the magic screen a certain number of positions. What you can do is actually step up this unit while the game's on, if you choose, and this will allow you to move the screen. Now, because you've shot your 4th ball, that means that you will not be able to move the magic screen unless you step up the time tree unit. You need to step that up in order to engage before 5th or after 5th, whichever you choose. Then the safest thing to do is to move the screen from the foot rail. And at this point, what I do is move the screen so that you have at least position D or E shown. This means that either 4 or 5 pieces of the magic screen have been replaced, so the default bingo card is almost entirely or entirely wiped away. This will reveal a red, a yellow, and a green section. Now, section scoring goes through an entirely separate mechanism, or suite of mechanisms really, that allow it to determine where your balls are and whether or not you should win. Now, it has to do this because the game doesn't understand, by default, if you have 2 balls in one color that are separated from each other, that it should actually award you replays. So instead, it's got to figure out if you have 3, 4, or 5 in that colored section, and then engage the search index and stop the search disk and start paying. It's pretty ingenious the way that they did this, with the interplay between the sequence unit and the winner unit. But that's a rather complex interaction. So what you need to know at this point is that with the screen positions moved, you can now move the balls into those different colors. Those use the same replay counters that your red, your green, and your yellow inline wins use as well. So if you're testing that, you need to reset the replay counters that you're testing. So let's take yellow. Now on many Magic Screen games, there's something called a super section. This allows you to put 2 balls in that striped yellow section that's revealed by default, starting with Magic Screen position A and going all the way up through the end, I believe, on Circus Queen. At least one hole is still visible, but at any rate, you've got that super section. Let's test regular scoring. So in order to do this, what I do is put the balls in 3 different pockets which are physically separated. We don't want them in line at all. Then run around to the back, push the plate, see what happens. You're going to hear a very alarming noise that is slightly more alarming than it is normally, and that's the sequence and winner units stepping up like crazy in order to determine if you've got the right stuff in order to win replays. So, assuming that you get paid out properly there, what I do at that point is assume that the section scoring is working for that particular section. And then I work my way through each section. I only do 3 in each particular section. It's highly unlikely, if you have your inline scoring working, that you're going to have a problem with 4 or 5 in a line, or in a section rather, because your 4 and 5 in a line works properly. And the main mechanism that really controls that, aside from finding the winner, is the replay counter. So, assuming that you've rebuilt your replay counters, and I saw on Instagram that you had, then you should be good to go. Do your simple 3 in a section test, and starting with the lowest odds, you only have to wait for it to count up 4. Your odds counters, your odds steppers, rather, your score steppers, as long as they've been rebuilt, then you should be all good. And going on in previous podcasts, information about that, what I can tell you is you want to make sure that it steps up crisply to every position and resets crisply back to the default position. As long as it does this, and there are no broken wires, then you should be all good. Now, there's one final type of scoring, and you mentioned it in your phone call, and it sounds like you've got it working, and that is the blue section. Now, the blue section detects balls a little differently than the other sections do, and that's because it needs so few in order to score. So if you have 3 balls in the blue section and you have 3 in the blue, scores 300 lit, then it should count all the way up to 300. Now, if you have 2 in the blue lit, you only have to drop 2 in any of the blue visible portions of the section. Now, the way it detects that is very similar to the other sections, but the difference is that it knows through the trip relay for 2 in a blue that it should start paying you. So that trip relay has to be clean and adjusted properly, and it is pretty rare that they come misadjusted, but it does happen, and they can certainly get dirty. But what I do is test for 3 in the blue and 2 in the blue, and then I do a single test for 600. The reason I take a little shortcut there too is because it takes so long for it to count up 600 replays. It takes forever. So at this point, you'll have maxed out your credit meter, and you simply have to turn the game off and back on, and it'll reset back to 0. it will not dump your balls until you push the start relay. But here's a little trick. If you push the anti-cheat relays plate, it will light up all the same numbers that you had lit previously, and from there you can reset any of the trip relays that you don't want just by lifting the little plate, and then trip another one with your wooden dowel, pushing underneath very gently, and it'll go click and fall. At that point you can test your 600 wins or your 2 in the blue. So there's not a lot of shortcuts to be had, because you have to make sure that the game understands that every hole is actually working appropriately. The only shortcuts that I've found are that you can kind of bypass the 4 in a section and 5 in a section for the most part. So let's move on from there to OK games. OK games score when you have 2 in the orange section. Now, this detection happens in a very similar way to the way that the game determines if you have 2 in any other section. But the game has to be able to drop all the balls and start an entirely new game with the appropriate features and odds based on which letter is highlighted in red on the back glass. This happens through a combination of the OK or red letter steppers and the green odds stepper. You'll have to verify based on the scorecard what it's doing. And the way that I test this is you can do it with simply the default green odds again if you choose. It doesn't hurt to try it a second time with another one. But you trip the OK light. This will allow you to move the screen. You trip the OK relay. I'm going to try and make this as confusing as possible. You trip the OK relay, and then you'll be able to move the screen over to the right, which will expose the orange section. Drop 2 balls in there, shoot your 3rd ball. You can drop it in the orange section or not, and then shoot your 4th ball and set it in any other hole. From there, shoot your 5th ball, drop it anywhere, and hold down the R button. What this is going to do is it's going to engage a writer which sits on one of the scoring cams and then open it up. If this opening doesn't happen at the appropriate time, then the red letter game will not start, or it will kind of half start and do some funky stuff. Now, based on the red letter that's highlighted, the game is going to automatically choose some odds and features to give you, and you just have to verify that it's doing what it says on the scorecard. If it doesn't, then you need to investigate either of the 2 red letter relays which sit in the back box, or your score steppers. And with that lengthy description there, which hopefully helps and isn't too confusing in audio format, that is how I troubleshoot the entire scoring process in a Magic Screen game. Other types of games have different methods, both of keeping track of scores and of testing their features, so those are discussions for other days. But for now, that is all I do to test the Magic Screen games, and it has only failed me in one instance where I had a problem in the green section of one game. It wouldn't pay 5 in a section, and the reason for this was actually a slightly misadjusted search index switch. Switch stack Z in most games. That required some careful finesse adjusting those switches is very difficult, and it worked perfectly in every other situation, but that was the fix. So if you find yourself in a situation where the scoring is not making any sense and you cannot figure out why, all your steppers are rebuilt and cleaned and wonderful and beautiful creatures, and they do exactly what they're supposed to do, then the next thing to look at is that search index relay. Alright, well, thank you very much for joining me. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or like Brandon, you can call me on the bingo line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter, at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at nbaldridge, or you can listen to us on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.